When the Budokai Tenkaichi 4 trailer was revealed, I was immediately excited. I loved the early Budokai and Tenkaichi games and sunk countless hours into Budokai 3 in particular. The trailer clearly tries to milk this nostalgia too, as it shows the classic games on an old CRT television. But after the fanboy in me calmed down and I thought about it, I'm honestly very worried that this will not be the game we were all hoping it will be. Back in the days of Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi, it was pretty much the go-to option for Dragon Ball Z fans. The only other options were often very poorly made or not well known enough to gain widespread attention. It was pretty much assumed that if you played a Dragon Ball Z game, you probably played the Budokai or Tenkaichi games. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but for a licensed game series, they were all pretty well made. Each game, while virtually the same in its core, added a good mix of extra things to do and small improvements to the battle mechanics. But with Tenkaichi 3 being the 6th game in this style, people were starting to get fatigued with this style of gameplay. While each game may differ in some mechanics, they were all kind of just different flavors of the same core idea. Eventually, the Tenkaichi formula grew stale, so future Dragon Ball Z games would experiment into what we have today. The Dragon Ball Z gaming world is a lot different nowadays. Fans today have much better options for any specific niche. Anyone who wants a game with great battle mechanics and a large competitive community will probably play fighters. If you would instead prefer to immerse yourself into the Dragon Ball Z story, you can always delve into Kakarot. If you want to create your own lore and play in a completely 3D environment, you can always play Xenoverse 2. If none of these are interesting and you miss the days where studios failed to experiment with the Dragon Ball IP, you can always boot up Breakers. The point I'm trying to make is that we've reached a sort of sweet spot for Dragon Ball Z games. The niches that fans are looking for have all been comfortably filled and are still supported with constant DLC. Even Xenoverse 2, a 7-year-old game, recently announced DLC based on the most recent Dragon Ball superhero movie. Fighters and Kakarot have likewise been constantly adding new DLC and updates to keep them feeling fresh. It's arguably the best time to be a Dragon Ball Z fan with the sheer amount of high-quality games available. So when I thought about what a new Tenkaichi game would look like, I began to worry, what could this game possibly bring to the table that we don't already have? At the end of the day, these games are made by large companies to make a profit for one of the most popular anime of all time. I'm not trying to sell you on socialism, this isn't some kind of weird pitch. That's just the name of the game for all large franchises. Whenever there is an opportunity to be lazy and still make a lot of money, any reasonable corporation would jump on it. Just look at the Pokemon series. People are so nostalgic over the series that literally anything Pokemon related will turn a profit. Even if it's a rushed mess, the creators admit themselves that it'll sell no matter what they do. While I do think that Dragon Ball games have been held more accountable for awful products in the past when compared to the Pokemon series, they are still susceptible to the same pitfalls. Which is why a part of me thinks that this game is just likely going to be lazily cobbled together and only appealing to the most nostalgia-blinded of fans. They know that Tenkaichi is one of the most beloved franchises, meaning Tenkaichi 4 may follow the same formula that gamers in the past were growing tired of. Now, I don't want to be some kind of Dragon Ball doomer, so instead of just negatively dissing on this announcement and being worried that it'll be a shameless cash grab, let's go into what I think will make this game great. Something that, if heavily invested in, could set Tenkaichi apart from the current games: the what-if stories. In case you've somehow never played the games before, the Budokai and Tenkaichi series were well known for their what-if scenarios. These stories range from something simple like, what if Raditz turned good, to batshit crazy like, what if Vegeta somehow turns Super Saiyan in the Saiyan saga. These stories have a way of getting fans invested, as they often create stories that are far more interesting than the original. While the modern games do deviate from the main story occasionally, none of them do this to the same extent as the original Budokai and Tenkaichi games. These what-if scenarios typically focus on creating entirely new stories by subtly changing some aspects of the original. These were popular back in the day, but interest in what-if stories is even greater now. Anyone who has fallen into the rabbit hole of Dragon Ball YouTube knows that what-if stories are very popular. Some YouTubers practically built their entire career off of what-if stories and lore videos. It has gotten to the point where I don't think there is a single what-if scenario that hasn't been made. Don't get me wrong, this type of community engagement is great. People watch them for a reason. It's really fun to consider alternate scenarios with these characters that we grew up with, especially when you consider the vast number of characters that never got enough time to develop. A perfect example of this is Raditz. Despite being the main character's brother in our introduction to a new chapter of Dragon Ball, he was unceremoniously killed before he even had time to develop. This obviously caused fans to want more from his character, spawning many what-if scenarios involving the Saiyan. The most popular of which is Moscow X's What If Raditz Turned Good series, even creating an original fan animation of this story. Moscow X isn't the only YouTuber either. Many other YouTubers built a large following with their what-if scenarios. There is clearly an immense interest in these stories, which is why I believe that Tenkaichi 4 would do well to capitalize on this. What-if stories are honestly not the only thing that would make the game good. Tenkaichi 4 could easily succeed by just making another well-made competitive game like Fighters, but by focusing more on what-if stories, I think this game could easily carve out its own niche. Making a copy-paste Tenkaichi game with the same old story just won't cut it anymore. Considering the amount of hype around a trailer that revealed literally nothing, I think people are just going to buy this game regardless. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't right there with them. In the meantime, I'm going back to the objectively best Dragon Ball Z game.